I thought it was probably time I did a video on something other than a dippy. People think that's all I do. This is a 26-foot ditch burn, a Rover model that I re-ribbed and put a bottom in probably about 12 years ago. Pretty nice boat. The fellow who owns it, he was bringing it into the boathouse here, and it's not his boathouse. It's a friend's who's letting him use it. But he managed to hit a spike sticking out of the dock and put a gouge in it. So, in a way, it might have been easier to bring it down to the shop, because here is where the gouge was. What I've done is I've masked off the area, and I filled it with epoxy. Unfortunately, I didn't get a video of that. But anyway, I sanded it down flush and progressively moved the tape out and then in again, so I didn't have a really heavy ridge. And just use an artist brush to, you can see where it's been dripping down, and make sure I make a little eaves trough here so it fell past the boat. And anyway, I've got about, I've lost track, probably seven or eight coats of varnish on this little area here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the tape off. It's probably been quite a few weeks since I've done this, since the last coat. I got busy doing other things, but the other thing, I wanted to make sure the varnish was good and dry and good and hard, because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to wet sand it with progressive grits of sandpaper to get rid of this ridge here. You can see here where I've alternated the area where I've done the brushing. And then I'm going to take a buffing wheel, and I'm going to buff that into the existing finish. And it's not going to be invisible, but it'll be a lot less visible than it was. While I'm at it, I noticed there are a couple of minor rubs on here. I think a lot of these I can probably just buff out with some compound. Going around to the other side here, I think there's another little dock rub here, but that might need a bit of wet sanding with maybe progressive grits of wet waterproof sandpaper down to 2000, and then buffing it. I brought my box of supplies here. Just thought I'd go over. A lot of people ask me about what can I do about a scratch. I mean, it used to be, when I started doing this, the only way to really deal with it was to wet sand the whole side of the boat and varnish the whole side of the boat. So the coarsest paper I'm going to use is 800 waterproof, and then I have these progressive grits here. This is 2000, 1500, 1200, and 1000. So I'm going to start with the on the ridge here. I'll start with the 800 grit. I'll go to the 1000, and then progressively down to 2000. And the whole thing that makes this type of repair possible is the change in technology of the buffing pads. These are a foam pad, and I use those with sorry, I've kind of messed up the label here. This is called Menzerna Fast Gloss buffing compound, and then there's the ultra fine, which I will use to finish it with. So it's not a cheap proposition. I mean, the buffer is about $400. These little packs of sandpaper are between $70 and $100 each. And there's a bit of capital investment in doing this. But anyway, I'll start off with the sanding, and then we'll get back to the buffing. I'm going to start off with the 800 grit around the edges here, and try and keep it in a fairly small area. When I'm sanding, I like to use this is a hard rubber sanding pad. It does two things. It makes it a little flatter. The other thing, when you're wet sanding, I remember when I started doing this, I'd One of the old guys I worked with, Ernie Jarvis, he said, "You're not going to tape your fingers?" I said, "No, I don't need to." And then by the end of the day, I noticed my fingers are bleeding. It sanded all the skin off of my fingers. So anyway, this pad, if I use that behind the sandpaper, it keeps me from sanding through my fingertips. I'm starting off with the 800 grit. I'm just going to try and keep the area really small. I'm working in the slip, so I've got lots of water available to me. I can still feel the ridge with my fingers, so it's going to take a bit of sanding here to get rid of this ridge. I'm going to put the video on pause here so I don't subject people to watching me sand in real time. It's like watching paint dry. Okay, I've got the buffing wheel here. Now that it's dried, I can see this is where I've sanded it, so it's quite visible now that it's dry where I've sanded it. So I'm just going to put a bit of buffing compound on here. See if I can get the camera on there while I'm buffing it. I'm not sure whether I can or not. There's the spot where I sanded it down to 2000 grit. The 2000 grit is kind of like wet newspaper. It's a lot of rubbing, but it doesn't look like anything's happening. But when you buff it, hopefully it's just going to shine like the rest of the boat. So I'm using this Minzerna Fast Gloss buffing compound, just putting a little dab on here. This is a 3M buffer. Fairly industrial unit. It's got a variable speed, so I'm going to start with a very low speed. What I do is I just put a couple of drops of the compound on here. Just work it around, and that way it won't fly out. The other thing I have to be mindful of is this is a very unique for a ditch burn. I used to think it was only Manette that did this, but on this model of ditch burn, it's got a spray rail carved out of the plank. So it's got a ridge at the bottom here. It goes full length of the boat on this boat. But anywhere I've got a ridge, you've got to be careful with a buffer that you don't burn through the finish on the edge. So I'm just going to start with a low speed. Get a little better angle here. Get a little better angle here. Now I'm just going to turn my attention to a couple of these scuffs. I don't think I'm going to bother sanding these. I will have to take the bumpers out of the way, but I'll just go straight with the compound. If that doesn't work, I might have to go back and sand it, but I'm just going to try buffing it for now. Okay, I've finished the buffing. I've just gone over it with a microfiber cloth. And all of a sudden you would never know. Actually, if I look really closely, I can see that spot, but you have to look for it to see it now. Just thought I'd get some pictures of the boat. This boat is for sale. It's a beautiful boat. It's had a new bottom. It was re-ribbed. The the 26-foot Ditchburn Rover model. Very unique model. I only know of two of them. But you can see at the back here, this plank, that spray rail runs full length and it's carved right out of the plank. It's very unusual for a Ditchburn. It's all been refinished. I did the stain and probably about the first 7 coats of varnish, and then Jack, the owner, he took it home and put a lot more varnish on it and a lot more elbow grease, and did a fantastic job putting it together. It's got a graded wooden floor, traditional Ditchburn windshield. It's got the navy top, which is in pretty decent shape. Anybody who has any interest in this, contact me, and this boat does need to find a new home. It's 26 feet long. And it's you can get yourself into a boat like this for less money than one of those awful wakeboard boats. I just noticed this other scuff. What I did with this scuff is I gave it, because it looked, sometimes when these get scuffed, especially this rubber dock bumper stuff, it takes a small layer of rubber on there, and the rubber doesn't really want to buff off, so I've just scuffed it lightly with a 2000 grit paper, and now I'm going to buff it. I'm going to use a little higher speed. Takes a bit of finesse, because what I'm doing with the buffer is I'm actually heating the finish until it melts and starts to flow, which sounds a little scary, and it is. If you're not careful, you can make a heck of a mess if you burn through the finish. But I started off doing paint, and with the new pads, it's possible to do varnish, which wasn't possible when I first started doing this. So I think that's acceptable. I'll put the bumpers back on and go to the other side now. I'm over on the starboard side of the boat now, and this is where one fairly big rub. I don't think it's as much of a scratch as it's where the rubber dock bumpers, they tend to wear off and they leave a residue of rubber. Anyway, on this one, because I've got to get that rubber sanded off, I'm starting with, what grit am I starting with? Starting with 1200 grit, which isn't too aggressive. The course of the grit that you start with, the more work it is to get rid of the scratches you leave when you start. But sometimes you need a course of grit to get rid of stuff. This one is taking a bit of effort to get rid of the rubber marks here. You see right here there's a fairly thick coating of rubber, so using lots of water, lots of elbow grease, And I'll sand it until I see those white spots disappear, and then it'll be a matter of progressive grits down to 2000 and then buffing it. It's a bit of work, but it's in the long run, it's easier than trying to figure out how to get the boat on the trailer and how to get it to my shop, how to find room in my shop. My shop is full at the moment. I've got actually a 21-foot ditch burn and a 24-foot ditch burn back in my shop now. There's some work on, so I guess now I'll get typecast as the ditch burn guy. So this is the as far as I'm going to go with the 1200. From here I'm going to go to the, let me see, this one is 1500, and from there let's see, just a little remnant there, but I think the 1500 might get rid of that. I'm just going to wait for this to dry. This is where I've wet sanded it down to 2000. When it's totally dry, it'll be that matte look all over. And that, when it's like that, it's dry and it's not diluting my compound as I'm buffing it, which interferes with the effectiveness. Up here, I'm having a hard time with this here. There's just a little scuff that I sanded out. I just went straight to the 2000 paper on that. Or sorry, I had to start with the 1500 on that, then 2000, just to get rid of the, I think it's mostly that rubber dock stuff, or it could be a scratch, but it was just on the surface, so it wasn't too bad. So as soon as this dries where I've sanded it, all right, it's starting to dry now. So as soon as that's dry, I'll just wipe it with a rag a bit more. There, I've got a nice 2000 grit sanded base. All I have to do now is buff it, and that will blend it into the rest of the finish, and it'll become invisible. Increase the RPM a little bit. Sanding scratches buffed out from the 2000 paper. Just going to take the phone out of this holder. Well, there's the side of the boat where the scuffs were before. I would not know where they were.